All right, looks like we have some attendees joining here. We'll give it a minute to let everyone load on in. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day so far. All right, still coming on in. All right, I say we kick things off. So thanks everyone for joining the MindShift webinar series hosted by O3 World. For those of you that don't know us well yet, O3 World is a customer experience consulting firm that helps brands figure out what matters most to their customers. We work with organizations like Vertex, La Colombe, and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to create authentic experiences that have a positive impact on people's lives. Today, we'll be exploring what it means to advocate for creating accessible experiences within your organization. But there's a couple things I want to mention before we get started. First is that we are recording this session, so you don't have to ask, and we will be sharing the video with you later on this week via email. Next, throughout today's conversation, if you just want to use the Q&A functionality to submit any of your questions, feel free to do that at any time throughout today's panel conversation. And if you see a question that you really like and are dying to know the answer of, feel free to use the upvote functionality. It's a little thumb icon that you could just click on, and we'll make sure we prioritize that question throughout our Q&A. And the last thing, we have an ASL interpreter here with us today. If you would like to use that service, just make sure you use the speaker gallery view, and you should be able to follow along. So that's all the housekeeping items. With that, I'll introduce today's moderator, Whitney Quesenbery. Whitney is the co-founder of the Center of Civic Design and an author of 3 books: A Web for Everyone, Designing Accessible User Experiences, Storytelling for User Experience, and Global UX, Design and Research in a Connected World. As if that's not enough, she also regularly teaches workshops on personas, usability, user research, and accessibility. And she served on the federal advisory committees for voting system design and Section 508. Whitney, thank you so much for being here to moderate this really important conversation. We're really excited to have you.
Well, thanks. It's really exciting. I want to start by, before we introduce the panel, by giving you some time, you in the audience, to let us know where you stand on accessibility. I think it'll help us kind of know what the range of people are out there. Are you just getting started with accessibility, or are you already deep into it in your organization? Because we're going to be talking about all of that. And Carol has put up a little poll for you to answer, and we'll just keep going a little bit while you have a chance to take a look at that and hopefully give us your answers. We have 2 people, Brian Crumley and Ashley Schroeder, who are going to be doing most of the talking today. And I'm really pleased because they work in 2 very different contexts that I think makes a big difference in thinking about how one does advocacy for accessibility. I actually work in the 3rd context, which is government. So I work in elections these days, and I like to say that we are the other big industry that gets sued for accessibility, the other one being education mostly. Because both of those are public and very visible and have very strong laws that affect them. But I think that there are a lot of things that we could learn from each other, whether we're thinking about being an outside agency or working within a big corporation or working within or next to government and nonprofits. So to kick us off, I want to ask Brian and Ashley to both tell us just a little bit about your role in the type of company environment you work in, just so that we have a little background. Ashley, could you start?
Sure, you bet. Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Schroeder. I'm a senior user experience designer at Southwest Airlines. I'm on a team of 5 really scrappy UX designers, and then we're inside a larger marketing department. And then we also have a large technology group that we work with as the full end-to-end software development cycle. But yeah, we at Southwest Airlines, we're really dedicated to our customers. It's a really people-oriented company. So it really aligns with all the values and in the spirit of ADA compliance and accessibility. And as a company, we are all empowered to be advocates for accessibility inside of marketing, outside of marketing, and then even our ground ops agents and everyone that you see on the plane when you fly with us. So it is a very high priority for us, and it's something we really believe in as a company.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, so my name is Brian Crumley. My background is actually front-end development and user experience, UX. Currently working at customer experience consulting agency O3 World here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You know, my day-to-day role is really on the strategic technologist side of things, working with our clients to kind of plan and execute their business goals on a bunch of different technical facets, best practice, SEO, performance, but you know, most importantly, I think on accessibility. So myself, along with the O3 accessibility team, we work across projects and disciplines to provide accessibility expertise and guidance, not only to our team for our internal projects, the work that O3 is doing for ourselves, the way that we position ourselves in the community, but also for our clients themselves.
So I want to do a follow-up, but first, for those who, in case you didn't see it on the pop-up, it looks like almost half the audience is in that third level, already doing a little accessibility, trying to get better at it. Very, very few are just still learning how to spell the word. But there's a good 30% for whom accessibility is a core value, and it shows in their work. So I hope that some of the things that we can bring to you in this meeting will either resonate with you, or that you can ask questions or make suggestions in the question box about things that we should also talk about. I want to just do one other question on this first one, which is maybe starting with you, Brian, which is that how does your company culture within O3, as you think about accessibility, bringing it to your clients and interact with the clients, what their company culture is like with respect to accessibility, and how that affects how you begin to think about the process?
Yeah, I mean, we very much try and look at it, you know, we think that to be able to go through and be able to have these conversations with clients, to be able to go through and guide clients, we need to kind of practice what we preach. And that isn't just in like the O3 website or something like that. That is, you know, in our hiring practices, in the way that we, you know, do events like this, you know, captioning and ASL interpretation, all the way down to, you know, the materials that we put out in the world should be things that are kind of practicing what we preach. So, you know, as much as possible, we've tried to go through with our accessibility initiative is, one, go through and educate, you know, everybody inside the agency about the impact that they can have when it comes to accessibility, not just on digital products, but really in kind of day-to-day life at the agency. But then I think also, you know, understand that it really doesn't matter where you're at in the process of things, that there is something that you can specifically impart a positive experience upon when it comes to accessibility.
Yeah, we used to say to development teams that every time you add a good piece of alt text, Angel gets their wings. You know, that it just, that little pile just adds up.
Yep.
And actually, you work in a field that actually faces your customers every single day.
Yeah, you bet. And so, yeah, Southwest, it's kind of like our team is responsible for all the digital experiences that you'll find. So desktop, web, Android, iOS, kiosk even. But we know that our experience with Southwest is so much more than our digital channels. You know, when you fly with us, we're known for our legendary customer experience and our customer service. And we really want to take that customer experience that you have on the plane and translate that into the digital experience. So the helpfulness and friendliness of our agents on the ground and in the airport, we want to make sure that our experience aligns to that as well. Whether you're booking a flight with us, changing your email, or you know, just either changing your flight, canceling your flights, all those things. And so we really just feel like at our very core, we just want to make sure our customers, you know, experience us in the ways that they do when they fly with us. So accessibility really aligns into that. And since we've been really, ADA compliant, we have been empowering everyone who works at Southwest to think with that lens and to be the change that they want to see, and then what they can affect in the space that they're in.
And how long has Southwest had an active accessibility program?
It's going on, I believe, around 4 to 5 years or so. Yeah, we really did. I know even previously we had some advocates inside of marketing, inside of our UX design team, and even in technology, where they're like, hey, you should really put alt tags on things, or hey, you should really transcribe those videos, or you should provide how-tos, or just make sure that tappable area in mobile is so big, just so everybody can access it. So before then, we kind of had these little guerrilla spots opening up within the company. And then when it became more official, we had more practices around it, more training around it, more advocacy, a lot more education around it in the company.
Brian, how long has O3 been making this an active commitment as opposed to just individuals trying to do the work?
Yeah, I'd say active commitment is probably closer to the three-year mark. There was, I think, that guerrilla style kind of like behind the scenes work that was happening prior to that. But I think officially, having our committee up and running and having structured, structured educational opportunities, the production of materials to support our staff has probably been about the 3-year mark.
So when you think about the progress you've been able to make, I think both within O3 and at your customers, what are the kinds of things that what are the stories you tell? What are the metrics you capture? How do you think about whether you're achieving your goals?
Yeah, so I mean, like I touched on, I mean, when it started, it was very kind of grassroots, so it was like basically any change that we could go through and put in place. If it was a simple alt tag or a button text that was a little bit more meaningful, like that was a win in the early days of things. But I think nowadays we've been able to go through, I think, inside of O3 to be able to go through and say, like, okay, how do we go through and find opportunity to go through and empower people in different roles to go through and take ownership of various aspects of accessibility? So, part of what we've tried to go through and do is produce materials and do internal educational events and seek formal training for folks who are interested, so that everybody, from project management and account management to UX and design to development and QA, everybody feels a sense of ownership, I think, over what they're doing. And it's kind of funny is there was a time, I think, where it was literally just kind of coming out of the folks that were like the accessibility people. It was, let me follow you around, let me make sure this is happening, let's make sure we're checking the boxes. And I think the biggest shift that we've seen inside of O3 is that there's now this kind of there's almost like this blanket, I guess, it's kind of been placed across everybody and everything. And now we see people that, they're asking the questions during client meetings, and they're asking this of the client, they're asking it of their peers. Questions come up during standing meetings that are related specifically to accessibility. So I think over time that the biggest thing has been that everybody is now starting to actually get a grip on that ownership side of things, and understanding that they are the ones that can go through and kind of enact the change that we want to see, both inside of O3 and for our clients. I think another really interesting thing outside of O3 with the clients that we have coming in, particularly maybe in the last 12 months or so, I don't know if it's necessarily related to the pandemic or not, but in the last year or so, we've had a lot more clients that come to us specifically talking about accessibility features and accessibility considerations. And these are not clients that have, have been sued or anything like that either. These are people that are, have heard people talking about it, have read about the importance of it, understand some of the impact, and they're coming to us. And instead of it's like, oh, we need to have this really cool thing, it's oh, do you all understand accessibility? Can you help us, be more accessible? Can you get us to a point where we are building a more equitable experience in our digital products? And that's been a really interesting change, because honestly, like even before maybe a year ago, maybe 18 months, we weren't really seeing that coming to us as like it's literally written as like a requirement, like we were the ones bringing it up saying, well, like, have you considered this, and now a lot of the clients are starting to be the ones, pushing the issue with it, which is really great.
That is great. Ashley, how about you? It's hard to move a big corporation.
Sure. It starts small, right? It starts with a few clumps of people, a few individuals really being loud about something, and then the trickle down effect kind of works from there. And the same with compliance for us. It's been, in the very beginning, it was a couple of individuals across the department and then in other departments who are just kind of being vocal about it. And then at first, I know that we were a little kind of like getting our toddler legs, and we'd make mistakes. We may not pass color contrast, or oops, a video went out, it wasn't transcribed, or but eventually, we kind of learned the second language of accessibility. And now I feel that over 4 to 5 years of training and educational opportunities, and then just kind of buddy systeming with people, just like, hey, check my work. Or I know we have a couple of individuals in the company who are really, we call them gurus, but they are just like, they have committed themselves to accessibility, and they are on top of every single, any kind of release that comes out or any new thing that comes down per the ADA, and they are on it. So we usually have these people in our back pocket in the company. There's Teams channels that we have, or like, hey, can you look at this really quick just to make sure I have this interaction right? Or can you think of a way that I could make this more simple for our customers? So checkpoints along the way in our development cycle have helped a lot, just in case it's, maybe in the design in the beginning, we didn't get a color contrast right, or we actually have some of our coworkers are very vision impaired, or they have a certain type of color blind. And so they may catch it along the way, just as we socialize different designs that we've done. And they'll be like, hey, I'm red-green colorblind, and I can't really see that. Yes, it has contrast, but I also can't see it. So we have a lot of people that'll definitely catch us on that. So yeah, having a lot of those checkpoints, and then having our sort of gurus in the bunch, and the different sort of centers of excellence that we've stood up in the different departments has really helped us stay committed. And really this really has become a second language for us. We're UX designers and designers at heart, and then accessible design is good design. So it's really just sort of folded into our everyday.
So it's really interesting hearing both of you talk about how it's kind of building. It's getting into the public air a little bit, as we've talked about equity writ large in our society, beginning to think about all the aspects of equity that we can personally put our hands on. So we talked about this when we did our little pre-show work, but this is about the point in the conversation when we always start to see questions that are like, yeah, you guys are so lucky. How can we make that happen? I can't get permission to do it. And I always wonder, why do we have to ask permission? Why can't we just do it? And so I'm going to reframe the question a little bit based on what you said, which is, what is the point at which you began to feel like you didn't have to ask permission? And how would you, if you were going into, if you took another job, Ashley, or if you're going into the next client, how would you be able to bring some of all the history that you've just talked about into that new work without having to start from zero every single time?
Sure. Yeah, I know. Yeah, having to start from zero is very hard. It sounds like a lot of our participants are, they kind of know how to spell accessibility, so they're on their way. But yeah, I think, starting small, as I mentioned before, it starts with just a couple of people. And really, I mean, I know I keep saying it, but like, accessible design is good design, making things simple, easy to understand. Write your language as if everyone has a 7th to 8th grade reading level, which is like from the, I think it's the Literacy Council, it's 7th to 8th grade reading level. So just making sure that, and it aligns so well to user experience. You want to make the most simple, easy to use, delightful experiences for your customers. So there's a pretty strong handshake between accessibility and UI, UX design. So I guess from a designer perspective, it's kind of silly not to, because if you design great experiences that are simple and easy to understand, that anyone can do, you're on your way to building compliant experiences.
So Brian, I'm going to make you face the dark side, which is, what are the roadblocks that you run into?
Definitely the forgiveness and permission model. I'm definitely more on the forgiveness side of things, much to the chagrin of my boss sometimes, I think. The roadblocks with that, at least some of the ones that we ran into specifically were, it was great being able to go through and do some of this stuff in a very grassroots, kind of like find your way kind of model for implementing things. But I think the biggest thing that we started running into specifically was one, like, accessibility isn't like as a developer, like I can have some impact inside of the development department and everything, but how do I break out of the bounds of the development department and everything? And how do I start helping people in other departments start to understand where they can play a role in building better experiences for folks, So you need to be in an environment where I think that cross-pollination of knowledge is a little bit more accepted. If you're in an organization that tries to silo people, I think you can definitely find some roadblocks very quickly, because you're only able to go through and kind of enact change within the bubble that you live in, So you start trying to find ways to break out of that and communicate with people outside of that side of things to help them understand like where they can play a role in it. I think the other thing is, project scopes and budgets and things like that, particularly when you're in an agency model, a lot of that stuff is very heavily regimented, when it comes to, if you say it's going to take X amount of time to go through and build something, and then you start, researching, well, like, how do I make something accessible? You start to kind of deviate a little bit from like maybe what the expectation is around how long it should take to deliver something, or how you go through and actually confirm that something is actually compliant that you're building. So, the guerrilla style way works up to a certain point until it maybe starts to have an impact upon budgets and scope, and you start pulling in other folks. And I think at that point, that's almost maybe what you would like to see have happen, is that people start taking note of it. Like you're like, well, you're taking a little bit longer. You're like, I see you're working a lot with people in other departments on these things. Like, what are you guys up to? I was like, well, there's this thing, accessibility. We're really trying to go through and produce a better experience, for our customers. I feel like this is something that should be more cross-disciplinary. I feel like this is something that as an organization we should push for a little bit. And that's kind of you opening the door from that small grassroots in your world kind of impact into something that is maybe a little bit more cross-disciplinary and starts to become a conversation within the organization itself.
Yeah, it's a great lead into my next question, which is about how you bring more stakeholders into the mix. I think you can answer this any way you want, of course, but first is, as you begin to sort of make accessibility part of the way the company works, not just the way your department works, are there structures that help you maintain that cross-disciplinary, cross-silo work? And then the other possible question, the way to answer this, is to talk about usability testing. I mean, how, or any form of user research, how do you bring people with disabilities into the process so that you're in some way working with and not for them? And does that help you share with people who maybe didn't start with the fire in their belly about it, what the impact is on people?
Yeah, I think that we're always kind of fighting the battle that we want to do more user testing with folks, and that's even before accessibility became like so kind of paramount to the work that we were doing. Unfortunately, it's still a battle that we fight with clients to be able to do true user testing, with folks. It's kind of a win some, you lose some kind of battle to get in front of customers, to get in front of users and everything. Part of how we've tried to go through and augment that a little bit is we've created a series of, I guess what I would call proto-personas, so that we can either use our own personas that we're developing with the clients and use these proto-personas to attach different types of maybe disabling conditions to the user stories, so that we can understand, like, okay, like, while we can't actually work directly with a user, are we able to go through and understand a little bit more about, the perspective that would be there?
Yeah, I want to put a pitch for the personas we created for Web for Everyone, which were not designed to be standalone personas, but they were there to sort of represent different ways that people interact with the web, which sometimes map to different disabilities, but don't always. And those are available free and out on the web that anybody can use to add alternate experiences or different ways of using the web to their existing personas.
I wish I had remembered them when we were working.
That's why I said them.
Yeah, we'll definitely look to revisit those. But I think that there's a lot of structure outside of that we've tried to put in place to kind of drive that cross-pollination, that education across the organization. I think that the proto-personas have been great to go through and kind of help keep, individuals with disability in mind across the board as we're working on stuff, because they're now kind of front and center when we're working through various phases of things. But we've also pushed internal empathy labs, which, some folks, I think, I think so the perception that some folks have of them is that they're a little bit groan worthy, and I would agree with them. If what you're trying to do is impersonate somebody with a disability, that is not the way to go through and do them. The way that we've seen a lot of success in going through and running empathy labs, both internally and with some of our clients, hasn't necessarily been like, this is what it's like with this condition. This is some of the frustration that you can feel in these experiences. Imagine having to go through and use a mouse nonstop. It isn't about necessarily the disability per se, but it is about going through and understanding, like, these are the challenges if we aren't taking into account accessibility with the work that we're doing.
Great, Ashley.
Yeah. So I guess on the usability front, we have a pretty mature usability adoption within the company. We had started it up about 3 years ago. And I think the benefit you get from usability is just wonderful. I've worked really closely with it's actually a usability team of one, but me and her are like this. And I have a real passion point for usability. And while we haven't really set out specifically to target customers with accessibility requirements, what's really great is that we've accidentally done it. We use a unmoderated testing platform called user testing. Recently, we used to do in-person moderated sessions with internal customers while we've been working from home. And then also we used a third party to run some of the tests for us. But what we noticed is that, when you watch the videos on some of our experiences, the zoom is like 300%, on the desktop experience. So they're kind of reading, they're moving and they're scrolling left to right and they're seeing the whole experience. We also see a lot of situational accessibility issues. It's like, you can hear cars going in the background, you can hear kids crying in the background, you can hear that they're walking through a busy area, and it's like, okay, they're on their mobile and they're actually running this test while they're probably walking somewhere. And so they have to be situationally aware of, yes, everything going on at the same time, but also what's going on their phone. So we've actually been able to capture our experiences with customers where they're doing other things, and just sort of the things they get distracted with every day. And what's also fun is, oh my gosh, used to be back in the day when you were worried about your experiences, you were competing with your Ask Jeeves taskbar. You were competing with Netscape Navigator taskbar. The amount of mobile distractions going on as customers are going through, like YouTube has a new video, your channel has a notification, Netflix just launched a new thing. I was like, I know this, I don't know if it really is aligned with this accessibility, but people are getting just bombarded all the time still with messages going on. So designing for that as well in a highly distracted environment, where, cognitive impairment is also an issue we have to worry about. So just making sure your experience can kind of override that and work with that. It's also important.
I love that you accidentally found your way into like doing like temporary and situational like disability testing.
Yeah, who knew? Yeah, happy accident.
Yeah, we found that just by I was working with Caroline Jarrett in a big university, and we found that just by saying that we welcomed people who used assistive technology, who in fact were eager to talk to people who used specific types that we were worried about, we actually got some pretty good participants. One of the things that's great is that the remote platforms are now much, much better. We were using GoToMeeting at the time, which was pretty accessible, but not perfect. But now, I think this is something the pandemic really has helped us with, and the universities need to be able to run remote courses and not get sued because they're letting students out, keeping students out of the class has meant that the platforms have gotten better, so they really can run tests. Now, of course, you're getting people who are technically proficient and can use the platforms, but it's certainly a start. So I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about how you sort of report up to your management, because I know it's a business world and everybody has to be able to prove things. So thinking about, how do you show the value of accessibility in the product? What metrics do you collect? Do you align with company ethics and inclusion guidelines? I mean, how do you kind of at the end of the year say, not we did 5 usability tests and we did 7 new products and we fixed 10,000 alt texts, but that what did we do in the real world to actually make impact on both users and the business?
Sure. I can start with this one. Southwest Airlines being an airline, it's in with a lot of federally regulated companies where, we kind of have the other side of the coin where we are regulated as an industry to be accessibly, to be compliant for accessibility, and, being federally regulated and having to be ADA compliant also comes with fines. So I think for us, one of the metrics of success for us is ensuring that the fines stay down. And you'd think that like, oh, who would do that? Who would find a missing alt text, and who would shout out this really obscure, accessibility violation and call us out on it? You'd be shocked. So I think for us, that's one of the success metrics, other than just having our company's values align with, the whole spirit of accessibility and everything. There is this unfortunate negative side that, like as long as, we don't get fined, and I think it's like $40,000 per customer, per fine. So, or per violation. So things can get pretty steep and hefty after a while. So just from a regulation standpoint, that's one thing that we definitely watch. But other metrics and usability, time to task completion, just making sure customers can get through very quickly, making sure customers can view our product, access it. They can book a flight with ease. They can change and cancel and do all the digital self-service things they can without having to call somebody. Always a good cost saver for us. So we're always thinking about those things in the back of our minds anyway, just as user experience designers.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not having any clients tell us that they're being sued is certainly a high watermark for a year of development and design efforts. So we'll take that anytime. Internally with the way that we're working, because being an agency where we have clients that are moving in and out of process, and we could be doing like heavy development at one point, and then we could be in like post-launch, kind of like maintaining at another time. I think part of what we try to go through and look at from a success standpoint, outside the bounds of like our clients, protected basically from any kind of litigation, is, when working with them, we are going through and putting in place different types of A/B tests, or we're monitoring basically the performance of the things that we're going through and putting in place on the sites. We're monitoring customer experience on certain portions of the site, particularly ones that are kind of part of the core user flow across the experience. So we're looking for basically like, is anybody reporting any issues or anybody experiencing any problems basically along those paths, at least in clients where we actually like, have those ongoing engagements with them to be able to do that type of monitoring. Internally, I think the biggest thing for us, given that, we have some teams that are dedicated to projects, we have certain teams that kind of move around from project to project as they move in and out. I think the biggest thing for us internally is about, how can we go through and deliver something like accessibility as efficiently as possible, in the time and the money and with the resources that we have. So using, we use Jira to go through and track things. So anything that is actually an accessibility remediation task is flagged that it has to do with accessibility. And our hope is that over time, what we see is that there are fewer and fewer of these things that are actually being flagged, as a part of our development effort, because our team is now just building these things into the process.
Yeah, I can see thinking about how many fewer tickets you get because you've already done it in the normal course of events. Actually, how high up does your reporting structure go? I mean, are you reporting to a marketing manager of some kind or a marketing? But does Word of Accessibility sort of go all the way up to the C-level?
Yeah, it does. I report specifically to one of the senior managers on my small little agile team of 5. And then we kind of have this like hub and spoke structure with our UX designers. So we do have this UX Designers Center of Excellence that we meet up with, but it does come on. It's a top-down initiative. We're all empowered and enabled to make those decisions. And so getting buy-off from my leader specifically is usually, it's no problem. And what's great about how we've worked accessibility into our practice is that, 4 to 5 years ago, when we got really serious about it, we started anything that we noticed, we would always retrofit our style guide to fit those enhancements. So what we're kind of working with is this kit of parts that are already, they're accessible, they pass, all the color contrast ratios are met, color palette is locked in. So speaking to Brian's point about moving really quickly, we kind of just have this kit of parts to build from. And so hopefully you're not making a lot of things new, but also if you have to, we have all those stop gaps in place from all the other accessibility committees that we have, and even into the development cycle, we have our touch points there for accessibility. So, but yeah, I'm lucky that, like my boss is like, needs to be accessible. Great. Okay. Like run with it.
So I just want to mention that we're beginning to move into the Q&A, and I'm working through the questions. So if anybody has questions that they've been thinking about that they haven't typed in there, go ahead and get that going now, so we have a good last few minutes of discussion. There's a question here about remedying PDF for accessibility, which I'm going to kind of duck on because of the technical thing, but I want to ask it as a bigger question, which is, there are two kinds of things you have to do in accessibility. One is to get the new stuff online or into the projects in an accessible way. And the other is that backlog of things that you've already put online. And this is probably a question more for Ashley, but maybe not. What are your thoughts about, I'll do one for each of you. Ashley, what are your thoughts about how you deal with backlog? Like if you have a whole collection of, I don't know, minutes of the board meetings that went up in PDFs and they weren't accessible PDFs because no one knew.
Right. Yeah, I know. I think every company has that Jira backlog going on or some sort of intake software backlog, and working to prioritize those is fine. But in terms of accessibility, we really look at it in terms of impact to our customers. If we can look at each sort of, we'll just call them violations. If we can look at each accessibility item that needs attention and look at where they are in the flow, look at our analytics that we can tie, site traffic to, where are the most important areas that our customers are going? Is it a video that is 10 pages deep and some FAQs that is rarely seen or hasn't been touched in years? Or is it in our booking flow on the purchase page and it's credit card information? So once you start looking at it through that lens, you can start to see a priority start building for you. And that's really how you can tackle it in terms of prioritization. You just have to look at it like, what's the most burning hot, item that needs attention at the moment? And then what's something that is, a little bit more low severity. But yeah, that's sort of how we tackle it.
Yeah, before I turn to Brian, I'll throw in something that we did when I was the editor of the UXPA magazine, which is that the way we dealt with making sure that forms, if we have, not forms, tables, if we had them, and alt text were all things, which were the basic accessibility challenges in our actually in the articles rather than the frame of the site, was that we made sure that everybody, as they were editing the article, indicated all the headings and put some in if there weren't any, because we had a standard around that. When you wrote the caption for any illustration, you also wrote the alt text, and that if there was going to be a table, you made sure that you noted which cells, which was the heading row. Was it a 2 deep heading row or 1 deep heading row? And just mark that so that when we sent the articles over to the person putting them online, they had all the information in front of them. And what I noticed from the editors was they started thinking about how the alt text interacted with the caption, how the caption interacted with the surrounding text in a very different way when they were doing it as part of the editorial process than when they were doing as part of a remediation process, even if that was a very, immediately after finishing editing. It made it part of thinking about the experience. So Brian, do you have any tips for making sure that things like transcripts that can turn into captions and PDFs are made accessibly as you're beginning to build a site?
Yes, we try and start those conversations early with clients, in all honesty. I think that those are maybe two of the biggest aspects that I think sneak up on clients, even if they know they want to be accessible and they come to you, asking about accessibility for their site. I feel like more often than not, they're taking that into a consideration. And, when we start talking about PDFs and videos and audio transcripts and everything, it comes as a little bit of a surprise, so, we try and go through and bring those conversations up really early in the process. because generally it's going to involve a third party, them partnering with a third party to go through and handle these things. So we want to go through and really kind of establish, what does that workflow look like? How do you want to go through and prioritize the media on your website? Like which areas are going to be, I think Ashley, you touched on, which ones are going to be the most high impact, which ones are from a traffic standpoint, the ones that are going to get the most eyes. And from there, we're typically able to go through and start to identify, okay, for an initial wave of accessibility remediation on media, this is where we want to go through and start. This goes through and covers, maybe 70 or 80% of where your users are going and what they're looking for on the site. And then as we're getting those out of the way, we can start to go through and hit some of the things that are, not quite as popular in the site structure, but we can go through and start rolling out support in other areas across the platform.
So what are your guys' thoughts about public accessibility statements, both as a sort of internal process to kind of set yourself some guidance, but also as an external process, and maybe even including on those things that haven't quite made it up the priority list yet for how people can request either request a particular page or asset be made accessible, or let you know about a problem. Can you talk to us about that whole sort of introducing yourself as a newly accessible company?
Yeah, I would say, from our side, I would say, like, just to put it out there and everything, I'm a huge fan of accessibility statements on sites. I think that, with particularly when folks are trying to go through and first get themselves kind of like out in the world and put forth a more accessible experience, it's very much a work in progress. It's going to take time, especially if you're not doing a complete overhaul, but you have to be able to go through and let people know that this is something that you are committed to. So, putting out a statement about, where you want to be, the importance that it is to you, understanding that, this is a gap, in being able to meet the needs of your customers, I think is critical, particularly given that none of this accessibility work that is going to be happening is going to happen particularly quickly. It's going to take some time to go through and put it in place. We also push pretty heavily on the idea that you should be very forthcoming about, where are the problem areas on your sites. If you know for a fact that a certain system at this moment, a certain workflow on your in your product or on your website is not accessible, then call it out. Let people know. Like, don't let them find out by going and getting focus locked somewhere, or navigating endlessly up and down a page trying to find something. Put it in your statement that this particular aspect of our website is not accessible at this time. Here is how you can find an accessible version of it, or here's how you can reach out to us and we can help you with this thing. And that's the biggest difference, I think, is that people are afraid to go through and admit when they have these types of gaps in their systems. So there's like, we just don't want to go through and let people know where it is. It's like, well, they're going to find it one way or another, So like, get in front of it, let them know, provide them an alternative means for it, and let them know that it is on the roadmap, that you will get to it and address it, and that you actually care about what it is that, that this is an issue and you care about going through and remediating it. And in the short term, you care about going through and providing an alternative for it.
Actually, you're more on the front line where you're actually working for the company that will get sued. How does this play out for you?
Well, you really got me thinking. I was actually just thinking, I was like, I don't know if Southwest Airlines has an official accessibility statement anywhere on our website. And that's something I have to take back. I know that we have many different FAQs and things like that of like, if I'm someone needing special assistance, how can I, go about navigating this experience or this experience in the airport? And we do have a lot of pages sort of pointing you to there and how to do it. But yeah, I think, like, I know that we do provide guidance on if we do link out to a site that could be not accessible, we make sure to like denote it with a little icon just to let you know, like, you are going outside of our site, that it's accessible. So click at your own risk. But yeah, as far as an official statement, I think that'd be a really great thing to have on our site. I think we just took it for granted that we knew that our site and all of our digital channels and even in our kiosks and then our airport experience is accessible. So, but yeah, definitely something to take back and think about.
Yeah, sure. I took on a site once. It was it was in a very public setting that was built. It was a lovely site. It was a little crowded screen, lots of stuff going on it, and there were a lot of accessibility problems. And the team took on fixing those problems in a very tight time frame. And so when we went back to some of our partners who were disability rights organizations, we said very gently, we think we have it right. And an email came back immediately, said, it was like, what do you mean you think? You know? And the next email was someone who worked for that person saying, wait, hang on, I'm on the site. They've done it for, okay. So it was sort of interesting. And what we actually ended up with was that we'd added some skip link navigation, and we'd fixed some navigation, but we added where you would normally put your skip link. We actually put the links to the 4 big sections of the page, so that you knew when you hit one that you didn't have to go through all of them. You get right to the section that you were looking for. And also let you know that the rest of the information was there, which is really, I think, kind of helpful. And we did get comments from people who took that openness as an opportunity to say, I see that you're interested, so it's worth my time and my effort to give you feedback, as opposed to giving feedback for people who will just ignore it. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I think it had a pretty positive impact. And I think it was really great for the team to think about what we were willing to stand up and say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at questions again. Brian, you're getting some kudos for how well you've gotten everybody engaged, and looking for some insights on why you've been able to do such a great job at O3 and with your clients when other people still struggle. What's your magic wand? Ooh. Or your not magic wand?
I'm a very loud voice in a room. That certainly helps sometimes. Honestly, it's more so about going through and finding ways for the topic to go through and resonate with people in the ways that matter to them. It sucks, but sometimes just like, don't you want to do the right thing? Like, isn't going to resonate with business folks. That's just the reality of it. And we don't really want to go through and play up the legal side of things either. I think everybody is well aware that, there is, the chance that you can be sued for not going through and meeting compliance. That is a reality out in the world. And some people are willing to go through and play the, safety through obscurity kind of game as long as they can. The way that we've tried to go through and kind of bridge some of these conversations with our clients in particular is helping them understand the impact that accessibility has on things that they already care about, on the things that matter to them. I think first and foremost, you come to an agency like O3 World because we are a customer experience agency. We specialize in, a user journey and helping kind of like evolve, what someone's experience is like. And that's tantamount to accessibility. You're trying to go through and create a more equitable experience for any user. The way that accessibility typically works is that you're going through and fixing something that is accessibility related for to meet a certain success criteria. But there's a very good chance that fix goes through and actually makes the experience better for everybody across the board. I think going back to what Ashley was talking about, it isn't necessarily only about permanent disabilities that you're helping people with. Situational disabilities and temporary disabilities all can be addressed during this. The other thing is, obviously these organizations are going through and they're investing marketing effort into brand awareness and brand loyalty. And I think touching on the accessibility statement side of things, being an accessible experience goes through and has some brand loyalty benefits to it. You're going through and you're showing that you care about your users, no matter where they're kind of coming from, no matter what their background is. You're producing an experience that is, hopefully optimized for them, and I think that goes a long way in going through and potentially being a differentiator in out in the world and everything. If your organization is doing things going above and beyond to create optimized, accessible experiences compared to some of your competitors. But then on the technical side of things, I think every company is fighting to, get higher up on the SERPs, have a better SEO ranking and everything, and accessibility plays directly into that as well. So, when when you're talking about accessibility, you're also talking about the impact that it has upon, you know, the technical structure of your site and how maintainable it is. You're talking about the impact that it has on existing marketing and business practices as it relates to SEO. You're talking about brand reputation and customer loyalty, you know, by going through and opening up and expanding your customer reach. And those are the kinds of things that we typically try to put the emphasis on when working with clients, as opposed to the right thing to do, legal concern side of things, because these are the things that I think resonate a little bit more when you're having these deeper conversations with people that don't live and breathe it, you know?
Ashley, do you think about the severity of the barrier as part of your prioritization?
Yeah, I think we also take into consideration like stress fringe, day of travel type things, where you're in a situation where your cognitive disabilities could be heightened in a way where you could get into either a frantic state, or I know that if you're flying day of travel and we have some, what we call it's IROPS, irregular operations, of change or a cancel for your flight, and then you're in that state and you have to self-serve in the moment, and then you're just looking for answers and looking for ways to self-serve. It can get very situationally frustrating and stressful. So we do take that into account as well. But yeah, actually, I haven't heard the term severity barriers before, so I'd actually love to hear what that.
Just the severity of, is the problem something that will stop someone from completing a task, or is it something that will be an annoyance? I mean, the one I see all the time is that the site is pretty accessible, except that the search button, the whole search function, is just not visible.
Absolutely.
or not done very well. And there's one where, of course, that's great because you can fix it in one place and you fixed it in the whole site. But so there's some things that are just things that make someone do more work to be able to use the site. And there's some things that mean they simply can't use the site or can't complete a task.
Yeah.
And I always think about prioritizing those higher.
Yeah. Absolutely. We take those, we call those branch openers. When we, at the very end, it's a go, no go type thing of like, is this going to prevent the customer accessible or not? Is that going to complete them from booking a flight, completing their task, changing their flight, those kinds of things? Yes. Open the branch, and pause everything. Yeah. So it's so much of a consideration, and that's how we really determine impact as well when we prioritize our items, just because, you don't want to have a backlog of high severity items going on.
I mean, I have a friend who's blind who wrote to me and said, I chose my own seat on an airplane because that's one that it's so visual. It's just been one of the biggest problems. And of course you avoid that whole thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, Southwest is in a unique position. It's like, we don't advertise our flights on Kayak, Expedia, those kinds of things. Like, we are the single retailer for any of our Southwest flights. So making sure that customer can come to the site and do what they intended to do just as good as everybody else. It's imperative, because they can't really go anywhere else. They can't go to an Expedia because it's a better experience for them to book. They have to come to us. So we could lose them. Customer loyalty is really big. We could lose a customer. What's actually great too is that we can, with our wonderful customer representatives, they take a ton of calls and tag them, and we'll deliver all of those calls to us that are in our purview that we can change. So they can hear a lot of like, I'm having trouble using the website, or the font size is really small, or whenever I Zoom, things break, or just general things like that. We can hear that. And we also have a customer feedback tool that I look at every single day to ensure that, just to see if I can see any trending UI issues our customers are experiencing overall. Was there an outage, like overnight where customers were impacted? But yeah, definitely that outside opinion and that outside customer input gets recorded and tracked, and we try to deliver it to the people who can fix that.
Well, cool. We're going to do the last thing. There are a couple of questions, and I'm going to pick one of them because I think they're both big ones. One of them asked about case studies, about demonstrating the ROI. And if you have any at the top of mind, that's great. But I want to invite everybody on this call to pop something into the channel, into the chat channel, if you know of them, because they're pretty hard to come by. I've looked. the ROI tends to be, Ashley, as you said, in not having fines, but it's a little harder to prove the ROI of having actually made your site accessible. Sometimes you get the ROI at the other side when you launch something that isn't accessible. So I want to turn that over to the audience and ask everybody if you have any great stories that are public that you can share. But the one I want you guys to answer is, I think you've talked around this issue a lot. So I think you've already answered a great deal of it. Maybe we can get in the last couple of minutes, which is, how do you manage the culture change it takes? Maybe it's a new person coming into the team. Maybe it's as you've expanded the team and thinking about what your next steps are, right? How do you keep the company constantly moving forward and bringing everybody along on this journey into accessibility?
Yeah, sure. I think I can, just getting that evangelization out to inside your team and outside of each team. I think one, you can look at it from an empathy perspective of, hey, 1 in 4 people in the United States has a documented disability. That's 1 in 4. That's you, that's me, that's glasses, that's grandma, that's everybody. So to me, it's just like, would you really want, your grandma, your mom, your sister, anybody going through these experiences and struggling through it and feeling like they're doing something wrong through the experience? So really just making it about that, it's not just a customer, it's people that you're affecting, and you want to make sure that they get what they need and have a good experience with you. But also, even from a revenue generating bottom line perspective, I mean, there's billions of people in the world with disabilities with over $1 trillion in spending power. So these are your customers out there. It's not just the specialized segment of people, they're your customers. And so I think by ignoring it, you're just kind of kicking the can down the road and possibly setting yourself up for more expensive costs later in fixing it.
How about you, Brian? I think, what has worked with your customers?
Yeah, well, I actually stole a little bit of my thunder on that one. Actually, I think that those are actually the perfect models. In all honesty, I think with internally within our agency, I think, not letting accessibility, be relegated to necessarily like project discussions and things like that. Like, we do a ton of just open evangelism, open events, open discussion forums, and everything to just constantly circulate information about, really like what we are doing and why we are doing it. I think that, like Ashley touched on, the biggest thing to understand is that, I think we speak about it in a little bit more of abstract terms with users and buying power and stuff like that and everything. But like, ultimately it is about your grandmother's experience, and people who, we benefit and everything from, kind of, our able-bodiedness and everything. But like, I think everybody, during this pandemic maybe has been kind of equalized a little bit to understand like some of the challenges that I think are faced, in a fully digital environment. So we try to go through and hold these, ceremonies on and off and everything that is really just constantly reminding folks and talking about these things and sharing information and, people talking about stories of, the experiences that they've had and everything, even with, temporary and situational disabilities. And I think when you start speaking of it outside the realm of, what I think is like kind of the commonplace understanding of what it means to, build accessible experiences, that, when you change it necessarily from compliance to like accessibility and experience and people behind it, I think that's when you start to see a little bit of a shift of people's understanding of it and people's, questioning and pursuit of actually putting in place accessible solutions across the board in their work.
Well, I promised that we would end on time, so I'm going to do one last thing and then turn it back over to Carol, which is, I just want to read something that Donald Phillips posted, which I think is just a really great way to end it, which is to say prioritization should include the impact to independence and dignity. There's no independence or dignity when one has to request an accessible format. And I think, so working towards it really being a way of life that just is, it goes without saying that we will, of course, make these amazing digital projects that we all make be something that works for everyone. Thank you guys so much. This was really wonderful. Thank you in the audience for the great questions. Carol.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you guys so much. Just want to thank all the attendees that are still with us for being here on this conversation with us for O3 World's MindShift webinar. We hope you enjoyed the event, learned a thing or two along the way. Thanks for all your great questions. Love seeing that kind of engagement. And before you head out, when I actually end this webinar, we're going to serve a survey. If you have the chance to give us some feedback, we'd love to learn some ways on how we can improve our future virtual events. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending. This has been great. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
And thank you, interpreters and captioner. Thank you so much.
Yes.
We're so glad you were here.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye.